Jason Leahy, thanks for joining us again on the Illinois Channel. As we are here at this educational conference in Springfield, there's superintendents here, there's school board members from around the state. They're going over a whole list of issues. As the head of the Illinois Principals Association, what are some of the primary issues that you're focusing on for your members?
Sure. Well, I think like anybody, we're always interested in what's happening with finances. But for us, other kinds of things with principals dealing daily with teachers, we're really interested in the number and quality of our educator pipeline. We've seen declines in the number of people that are available in the candidate pools for teachers, for principals, and that just continues to have a precipitory effect in the upward direction when you look at what's happening with teachers. And lessening the pool there usually means we're going to have fewer numbers available for school leadership positions. Our folks, just when it comes to managing their buildings day to day, continue to be concerned about the number of substitute teachers that are available. We know that we had some legislation passed this last spring that was finally signed into law with 2912 that was one of Senator Luchtefeld's last bills before he retired that hopefully will provide some relief as we see the fee for substitute teacher registration be reduced. And then hopefully make it a little bit easier for individuals to become subs when it comes to the lessening of the requirements there. We know, too, with that legislation that...
Let me interject from it. I think people in general might be surprised to hear that we're low on teachers and low on substitute teachers. You must be getting feedback from your schools. What accounts for that shortage?
Sure. Well, I think it's a variety of things, associated with that, and it's. I'll probably speak more anecdotally here than not at this point in time, but I believe that there's data out there to support the fact that teacher morale is low, educator morale in general is low. I think people are under a lot of pressure when it comes to fulfilling their responsibilities as educators, as teachers. The expectations are very high, and I don't think people are concerned about high expectations. But when you have high expectations of people, they need to feel supported and have the resources in order to get the job done. And when you don't have those types of things, typically what comes as a result is frustration and a lowering of morale of people. So I believe there's that. I do also believe that when you look at what we've been able to do because of the budget situation that we've had in Illinois, our inability to continue to provide fair and equitable raises when you compare public school teachers to the private sector. I think the pension related issue, people are suspect of that. They're very concerned about that. When young people are looking at the length of time that they would have put in the system to receive a pension, as well as seeing that it's at or even maybe below of what Social Security might offer them, the amount of time that they would have to remain working as an educator. I mean, those are all factors that are compounded upon and make it real difficult. Teachers have less autonomy in the classroom due to the various mandates and things that they're required to do. So those are some anecdotal things that I've heard. I believe there is some data to support some of that. But up and down across the board, not just in the most remote rural parts of the state, but even in our more populated areas, it's difficult to find the number of teachers that we need to fill our classrooms. And it's not just that what concerns people. I think this is kind of the canary in the coal mine, that the number of people that are applying for educational positions has dramatically reduced.
Is that true across the nation, do you know, or just in Illinois?
Yeah, no, this is a national issue. But I think because of Illinois' climate here, when you deal with the budget, a variety of other things has probably put more pressure on our state. The fact that we've got almost 50% of our kids, as soon as they graduate high school, they're going outside of the state of Illinois to go to college somewhere else. Well, oftentimes what happens is they go to college somewhere else. They might find a future partner or spouse there and may not come back home, particularly if the prospects for jobs and things aren't good. And that's obviously the case here in Illinois. So
we sometimes hear, let's say with doctors, you might get any number of people willing to work in a major metropolitan area like a Chicago, but it's hard to have doctors go to a rural hospital. Right. Is that true as well with educators? Is there a greater shortage, a harder time hiring in some of the rural areas where maybe there's less to do for a young person than there would be in a major metropolitan area?
Sure, I believe so. So when I was principal years ago at Illini Central High School, which is in Mason City, Illinois, just about 30 miles north here of Springfield, and this was now several years ago, but now I ended up getting another high school principal's position before this happened, but the thing that probably kept me up at night more than anything else in small rural Illinois, even though we were only 30 minutes north of Springfield and not all that much further away from Peoria, still remote enough that I was very concerned about filling a physics/calculus position that was going to come open in the next 3 to 4 years before I ended up leaving there because of a retirement, and finding people to come and live, and it was going to be replacing someone that was an icon in the district that had pretty much spent her entire career there, lived in the community, was invested in the community, and finding individuals that are prepared to do that, particularly when it comes to math and science, that's a real challenge. So yes, no doubt that the rural, more remote areas of the state are having more difficulty because the communities, for young people in particular that are pretty mobile now, pretty used to doing things and want options, that unless they grew up and lived in those kinds of areas, that may not be all that attractive to them.
I don't want to throw you a curveball here, but let me, I'm thinking about, everyone knows technology is changing the world and changing it dramatically. We have self-driving cars coming into the pike and any number of other things.
With young children, Terry, I'm hopeful that some of those self-driving cars can just take care of them, and I don't have to worry about them getting behind the wheel, but that's a whole other thing.
Well, the reason I ask, I'm reminded that a number of years ago, about 15 years ago or so, Western Illinois, which is a teaching school, university, they would say to the school like you had in Mason City that there might be exceptional students, but you couldn't hire a teacher to teach that 1, 2, or 3 exceptional students. So they would put classes for those gifted students on satellite.
Right.
And people would contribute. It made sense because you didn't have to carry the whole load in your budget for that one teacher. With technology, for all the budget issues we're talking about, to what extent are we looking at new ways of teaching and the new technologies with the internet, or is that something that kind of gets pushed aside because of all the budgetary issues we have?
Well, I think the schools are looking at every option that's available to them. I think leveraging technology is definitely not something new. You mentioned the satellites. I remember those satellite dishes sitting outside where I went to school in Griggsville, Illinois, and individuals taking classes that maybe they wouldn't get otherwise, be it a certain type of physics class or a certain type of anatomy class that wasn't available in small rural Griggsville. So I think districts are doing everything that they can, and they're looking for innovative ways of connecting. But I was just speaking earlier with someone that's affiliated with the Education Superhighway. We've got districts, I kid you not, in the state of Illinois that still are on dial-up to try to get their broadband access, and so they don't have the bits per second per student in order to support some of the kinds of things that you're discussing. But I do.
Yeah, because we talk about foundation level funding,
right,
and that's been a recurring talking point. But I'm just wondering, I don't know if there's a technological magic bullet, so to speak, that where we can educate more for less.
Well, here's why I would tell you that. In my personal opinion, this is one of my core values where education is concerned. I absolutely believe technology can enhance greatly the educational experience. It can help you differentiate instruction and allow kids to go on paths that maybe they couldn't otherwise because now the internet is available as a resource to them. However, I firmly believe that kids learn best when they can be connected in a deep relationship with an instructor. And it doesn't even necessarily need to be, in a relationship with someone in the class that they're teaching, but they've got to have individuals that can be there, that can encourage them, that can coach them through the areas that they're struggling with, and work with them. And I think it's pretty clear that you still have to have people as part of that. Now, if we can use technology in order to enhance those experiences, then we should. Without people, though, all of the different initiatives, reforms, all of that stuff have come to fruition that have been successful, have been because good quality people have gotten that job done. And using technology for the educational experience is no different you got to ultimately still have people making that happen and connecting it to the kids.
And lastly, I mean, we can always talk longer, but when you talk and go to the Capitol and talk to lawmakers about your issues, to what extent do you get a sympathetic ear or not? Are they hearing what you're saying that you need, and do you have any hope that you'll be getting some of those new tools?
Yeah, well, I think fortunately, when you think about the business of education, I think we get more than a sympathetic ear. I do think we get people that are very engaged. They really do care. You're probably dealing with lawmakers that have their own kids in school somewhere and engaging with the system in some way, shape, or form. So when they're having those conversations, there's a real personal interest. I mean, there is for me. I have 5 of my own children that are in school, and so it's very personal for me. I do think that they want to figure this stuff out, but it's a challenge because we're dealing with such varying points of view on how to go about doing it. I think, what I would be hopeful for is we'd have more thoughtful pragmatism moving forward, and rather than zealot ideology. I don't know if that's a real term or not, but I feel like we need folks to be willing to let go of certain things and be willing to come into the center, and that's both sides of the aisle.
One problem on the school funding formula, and they're talking about changing the school funding formula. Senator Menard has done a lot of work on this and kind of pointed out the discrepancies when you have, as you were talking about the school, you were a principal at Mason City.
Illini Central, sure.
That you just don't have the concentration of commercial buildings. The property values may be a lot lower than in a Chicago or the Chicago suburbs. So your tax base from local taxpayers is just going to be lower, and there's nothing much you can do about that.
Right.
Should we get away from such a reliance on property taxes and have maybe at least another, I don't know whether it's a sales tax or something else that would be more universal, so we're not having a geographic problem when it comes to education?
Well, I think obviously the current system that we have is broken. I will say this, Terry, that regardless of what we do with the formula, and I do think we need to make some improvements, like we've been supporting through Vision 2020 for the evidence-based model. Regardless of what the model is, though, you've got to have money to put into the system. I'm sure every school district in the state would like to be less reliant on property taxes. The hard part about giving up that reliance, though, is the state's not been a great partner when it comes to ensuring that dollars are going to be made available. And so schools are going to the only well that's got any water in it right now, which is the property tax base, which makes it particularly difficult for those districts that have very little equalized assessed valuation at their disposal in order to generate the kinds of revenues that they need. And so obviously those districts need some more support from the state, and really to ensure every kid gets the adequate education that they deserve, that we need. I mean, we need that human capital to be elevated to move us forward as a country, as a state, our economy, just as a nation, as a people. We need to make sure that they get the help that they need locally. And I think through the evidence-based funding model that we're proposing as an alliance and as Vision 2020, it can help get the job done. But again, you got to have money in order to do it. Doesn't matter what the formula is. If there's no money going in, the formula doesn't work.
All right, Jason Leahy, thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Appreciate it.